Hey, Sven here. One of the most important functions of AI modules in process optimization and process automation is the structured extraction of data from documents. For example, you might receive an invoice as a PDF, extract the invoice items, check the tax, the payment method, and much more. And then you can automatically process it further. And since yesterday, Make has provided its own module for this. It's called the Make AI Content Extractor. You can see it here on the 8th of July. It was introduced. It's still in the beta phase at the moment, but I jumped right in and, of course, wanted to try it out immediately. I've set up a simple example for us with which I can show how all these functions can actually be implemented. I'm Sven. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been involved in process optimization and quality for over 33 years, not just in business, but in all areas of life. And much of what I can do today, I learned through experience and trial and error, and I know what really works. And in my videos, I want to show you how you can use intelligent process automation profitably for yourself and your business. And if you're not quite sure how to get started, just book a free call with me. You'll find the link for that below this video, and then we can see if there's something we can change together. So let's get started. There's this blog post here introducing Make AI Content Extractor. It basically explains what it is and why you should even use it. Of course, it works just like ChatGPT, but it's simply integrated here, which also makes it more cost effective. And yes, it also explains here how it basically works. Then in the user manual, under the apps, you find a lot more details about it, like all the parameters you can set in the different modules and much more. And I've just set up the following example. I've created a small scenario here with 3 paths. One to try out the functions with documents, one for the audio functions, and one for the image functions. And all these modules basically work the same way. If we take a look at the first one, you'll see it still says it's in beta here. Of course, that's just a notice, which will disappear at some point. And now you can load a document either via file or by URL. If you upload it via file, then you're already familiar with the mapping where, for example, data from a previous module is passed directly as binary data. And if you specify a URL, then you simply download the document from somewhere. And I've made it really simple for myself this time. Here in Airtable, I just created a small table and put in 3 different documents: an invoice, an MP3, and an image. And now I'll just select them accordingly and have simply entered the record ID directly to load the respective document. Let's take a quick look at it. The document is an invoice, for example, from our hosting provider, where I can see the different items listed here. The audio file is an episode from our podcast, our AI briefing podcast, which comes out every morning. And the image, that's one of those generated pictures I made several months ago with Darth Vader on an e-scooter. So I'm using these 3 documents to run the test. That means I've simply chained the different modules together here, and they're executed one after the other. And I think it's easiest if we first take a quick look at the modules to see what they can actually do. So the first one here is extract information from a document. This is completely unstructured. You can also see here that it has to be one of the file types, PDF, PNG, and so on. I just went with a PDF for now. Then I can set the pages here, for example, like in this example, only page 1 and pages 3 to 6. I actually think that's pretty cool. And you can also set the limit for the maximum number of pages. With text from invoice, that's very specific, and we'll see that in the results as well. The structure is identical, but then we get the data back in a structured format. And with text from receipt, which is basically a delivery note, I would just assume it works exactly the same way. For the audio modules, there are 2 of them, namely transcribe an audio file. So here again, you provide the URL. Then I can also specify what language it is. Yes, but here it says it's optional, but if you know what language it is, it's just better. Then there's the profanity filter mode, for example, the swear word mode. I would just say, let's set it to empty. There aren't any swear words in the podcast, but I would still definitely turn it off. And then there are the so-called channels here. So if this audio file has 2 channels, then it can process them separately. And then there's also diarization here. That's the recognition of multiple speakers. So for example, if you have an interview in a podcast, then you have two voices, and then you can set number of speakers to 2 here and have it transcribe them separately. Then there's also translate audio to English here. So obviously you can only translate into English here, but since the podcast I used here is in German, we can try that out as well. And for the image, it's basically like generate a description or a title for the image. Then there's the whole thing again as advanced there. It's not just I forgot to open it, but there's also not really, well, there is a setting, namely that I want a gender neutral description. So for example, if a woman or a man is detected, then person or something like child would be used. I'll leave that on no for now. Then in advanced, same settings, there several such titles are generated. Describe image, a super exciting feature, which we'll see in a moment, where you can basically have a text description generated of what can be seen in the image. For example, we use this with a client who has images of construction sites and so on. And then with such a description, we can identify what's in the image and, for example, assign it to a social media post. Yeah, and here you can adjust a few more things. So I could also add an extra prompt here, like saying, describe it in a funny or serious way, or however you want, maybe technically, with some specific terms. And you can set temperature and taupe, which are set to 1 by default. Yeah, then extract text from photo. That's definitely interesting as well. Yeah, if there's any text visible in the photo, then I want to have that as text. Image tags, this also makes perfect sense. If something is recognized in the image, then a tag is generated for it, which is especially interesting for social media posts. And detect objects, that is also a super exciting feature where you can basically recognize certain objects in the image along with their positions. So that's the brief explanation of the modules for now. And now I'll just let the thing run. So basically the document will first be downloaded and then run through all these modules, which don't have any relation to each other at this point. They're simply lined up one after another in these 3 different areas. You can also see here that text from invoice takes significantly longer than text from doc because the data is queried in a very, very structured way there. It's the same here with text from receipt. Transcribe audio of this audio file is probably about 3.5 to 4 minutes long, and it's amazing how fast it processes. I really find that interesting. The translation is also very fast, and these image functions as well were done within just a few seconds. What I still haven't figured out yet, and we'll see this in the results in a moment, is if we look at the end, detect objects is still running. It's been called about 13 times now. I didn't really understand that. Of course, that could be because of the image tags. Yes, of course. Okay, good. So I actually made a mistake here. Now I get it. So the image tags, they actually deliver 13 bundles, and that's why this thing has been called 13 times here. Okay, I made a mistake in how I set up the scenario, but at least now I understand why this is happening. All right, let's take a look at the individual results. Text from doc, content. And now you can see here, this is now a complete continuous text. But of course, I could also process this further in some way using some ChatGPT modules. It gets interesting here with text from invoice, because now you actually have the customer address, then the region, so where exactly can it be found, right? On page number 1, with these polygon parameters, basically a kind of frame showing where it is. And here you can also always clearly see the confidence level with which the AI successfully recognized it in percentage points, so 83.6% in this particular case. Then, for example, you will find the company name, the customer number, the invoice date, and much more valuable information. And payment details. And I already noticed something here. Here, the IBAN and the SWIFT parameters are included. But what bothers me about the overall result in the end is that the type of payment is missing. It's mentioned in the text in the document. It says that the amount will be debited from the account within the next 3 days. And for the automatic processing of invoices, I consider this a very important function because, for example, we want to be able to simply forward an invoice that is recognized as such where it says it will be debited or has already been paid by credit card. But now a person still has to look at it and check whether maybe a bank transfer is needed. And I find that a bit annoying, but maybe that will come with the improved version once it's out of beta. Maybe that will be included then. Then here we have text from receipt. You can see there's a bit less here now because this isn't about invoice line items. This is also about content. For example, the line items, which are also included here, the description of the line item, for instance, but it's not with all the financial data, so to speak. Instead, you have things like merchant name, merchant phone number, and so on. So in any case, the extraction works quite well. There's still one little downside, but so be it. Yeah, maybe that's something we can expect in the next version. All right, transcribe audio. Let's take a look at this. So the input was the URL and diarization is empty because there's only one voice. And the output, if I look at it now, today is the 9th of July. These are our topics here, for example. That's how I can tell that it's been transcribed well. However, our podcast still has a small error. Whenever the ampersand is used, it sometimes says and, especially when there are English words around it, like here with AI Act. And then it says end. That's how I can now tell that it's been transcribed well. Well, and now there are 4 articles here, which are now running one after the other, merged into a continuous text. Then here it also has the so-called combined phrases. I can't see any difference here now. I don't know what exactly was done here. Phrases, these are now individual sections, which might always be clearly marked, especially when there's a significantly longer pause or a natural break in the flow of information. Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, so these are our topics. That's the headline. And then comes the first article. MS and complexity. It should be LMS. LMS and complexity. Researchers have developed a method and so on. And then next comes the actual article. Yeah, so I could imagine that these phrases in particular could be quite helpful if you want to further process the data. Okay, translate audio to English. Well, that should be trivial. It's simply the text that has been extracted and then subsequently output in the English language. The woman's actual name is indeed Virginia Sundergeld. So this particular aspect does not present a significant problem here at all. Okay, then we've got that covered too. So now let's take a look at get image. I'll take another look at the picture. So what do we see here? We see Darth Vader in a pink dress. Here we see Pink Vader standing. You might think this is Times Square. He's sitting on an e-scooter. Let's see what the description actually did here. First, let's look at the image caption. A person in a garment on a scooter in the city. Yeah, okay, then there are various descriptions here. 10 of them. It's the same again. Person in a garment on a scooter. Blurry image of a pink sign. Person wearing a black helmet. Alright, so whether you can actually do anything with these other captions, I don't know. I think the first one is actually pretty good. Okay then, describe the detailed image. The captivating image vividly depicts a person, quite uniquely dressed in a full Darth Vader costume, but with a truly unexpected and delightful twist. This individual is prominently standing on a very busy and bustling city street, and is notably wearing a vibrant, eye-catching and rather tall pink dress. Okay. The figure is carefully positioned on the far left side of the entire image, leaning ever so slightly and casually on what distinctly appears to be a sleek scooter or a very similar personal vehicle. Yeah, and then in the background here you can see a pink radar on a billboard. Yeah, so here it also says likely Times Square in New York, so that's actually a pretty cool description. And down here, there's even a little more. Okay, so here it's like Darth Vader in a pink dress and so on. It's definitely a humorous scene. So I think the description is pretty cool. So what else do we have here? Extract text, pink radar. The only thing visible here is get image text, clothing, building, person, woman, street, outdoor, footwear. Okay, I can't really make out the footwear. Man, city. Magenta is the color. Okay, girl, dress. Okay, so it's a bit tricky. The tags, I don't know, maybe you need to tweak them a bit more. And last but not least, detect objects. executed 13 times because of the 13 tags. So of course, we'll just look at the first operation. Then what do we see here? A helmet, a person, another person, another person, and yet another person. And then again, you have this bounding box here, meaning the positions and the pixels of the image. I would need to check that now using a few examples. But since there are several people here and different coordinates, I think it actually fits quite well. What's difficult for me here, of course, is how could I control which objects should be detected here? Because I can't add an additional prompt here, for example, to say pay special attention to or something like that, as I mentioned earlier. And now let's take another look at the image. I mean, sure, the different people are identified here, but for example, when it comes to this particular figure, that's something I find a bit lacking in this object detection. But so be it. So for a first test, it's already quite exciting, quite interesting. Just take a look at the modules yourself. It's set up within a few minutes, so you can definitely experiment with it quite easily. Meg has released a whole bunch of new things recently. Maybe you'd like to watch the video where I use the MCP server. You can find the link to it up here above the video. So have fun and see you next time. Ciao.